Greetings, Iain from RTO here. Welcome to another special, and a very special. As you see, I'm not on my own. I'm not with Richard. We've got Joe with us. So welcome, chaps. This is our first collaboration between the three of us. Good morning, chaps.
Hello. This should be really good fun, yeah.
Yep. Yes, and we're going to talk about Mike Oldfield that I think is very special to all three of us in some.
Yeah.
The way we're going to do this, we're going to go through the decades. We're going to pick one album from each decade. It's the 70s, the 80s, 90s, the noughties, the 10s. And we're going to have a wild card because I'm sure we've all got a good reason to have a wild card. So how we're going to do this, Richard will go first, then Joe, then myself. So we're going to start back where it all started for him in the 1970s. Over to you, Richard.
Thank you very much. Right, the 1970s, believe it or not, is not my favourite decade for Mike Oldfield albums. It's actually my third favourite because there's a couple of albums I'm not keen on from the 70s. However, the first three albums are brilliant. Tubular Bells, Herders Ridge and Omadhaun. But I just can't justify Herders Ridge and Omadhaun being above Tubular Bells. So for me, the album of the 70s is Tubular Bells, although I do prefer Tubular Bells too, but I'll come to that later on. It's a fantastic album. I love it to bits. I absolutely love the instrument introduction, with all the various instruments, glockenspiel and so forth. The opening part, which was used for the Exorcist theme, I think is great. Now, a lot of people get confused. They think that was the single off the album. There was a single in the UK called Mike Oldfield's Single, but it was actually the folky part on side 2. I think it's about 9 minutes in, which is absolutely brilliant as well. Although I do think the Exorcist theme, as we call it, the opening, was the single in America. But I love all parts of it. I love the sort of monster heavy bit on the second side as well. And then finishing off with the Sailor's Hornpipe, which the version on the box is even funnier. But I still think the version on the original album suits the album better. So for the 1970s, Tubular Bells from 1973 is my choice, and it got to number 1 in the charts.
I'm not going to say too much. So have you got anything to add to that, Joe?
No, I mean, actually, I completely agree, Richard, what you said. I personally prefer Tubular Bells too myself. I'm not going to talk about that one potentially, but I do love that album. I have the feeling I'm going to be the odd one out here when it comes to the 70s. Because, you're probably thinking, I've got the Tubular Bells shirt on, that's going to be my choice. There's no arguing Tubular Bells is his most iconic album, and I think Omadhaun is probably the one I would argue for being the best. But you've not asked me for the most iconic or the best. You've asked me for my favourite, and my favourite is Incantations. I think it's his most intellectual piece of work, in that you've got really clear influences from Philip Glass and Steve Reich in it. It's very minimalistic, and it kind of repeats its themes. It slowly builds them up. Mike Oldfield's guitar work doesn't come into about 8 minutes into the piece. It starts off with his brother, actually, Terry, playing the flute. And Terry's done some great albums himself, kind of new age sort of style stuff. And I think Mike generally doesn't like his albums to be described that way, but I think this one is probably the closest that sort of comes to fitting that description. It does have a kind of new age feel to it at points. I love the use of the Stringfellow poem in it. You know, I'm not going to say the whole album works or that it couldn't have been perhaps condensed into a single LP, but I think when it works, it really works. And for me, it's one of those albums that whenever I'm on a long car journey, I just put it on because I find I kind of go through this journey and it's really sort of enchanting and hypnotic. I think it's the first time he used a string section in one of his albums. And, you know, it kind of gives it a more magical feel. I love the use of the vibraphone and the African drums in it. And yeah, the live version on Exposed as well is fantastic. So yeah, that's my pick, Incantations.
I couldn't agree. It's a great album. It nearly made mine. I love the part 3 when the vibe comes in. Absolutely stunning piece of music. Yeah, I think it's a very good choice.
I'm not keen on that album. It's my least of the 70s, to be honest with you. I think it's too long, too repetitive.
I knew that Joe would pick Incantations because we've had this conversation before, so I got that one right.
Yeah.
You all know what mine is because it's a very special album to me. It's Tubular Bells, yeah. I'm not going to go into detail why it's my favourite because you two know by now, and I think all the viewers do. But again, it's got some lovely stuff on it. You've said it all, really, Richard. But I do like the Pilltown Men. Apparently, that bit inside, he was drunk and he demanded. He went in and just said whatever come out of his mouth. He was absolutely drunk. And going on to the Sailor's Hornpipe, the bit with Vivian Stanshaw, they did that when they'd come back from the pub. And basically, it was Mike following Vivian around the house, just playing his guitar. And I mean, I know the good thing is that Record Day this year, Mike is releasing the Opus 1, which was its working title. So that is going to be a great album. I know it's we've all heard it before, but it'll be just nice to hear how it's going to think. So that was my favourite album of the 70s. Oberdorn come very close as well. I love Oberdorn.
Yeah, I'm super excited about that Opus 1 release. That should be really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, shall we move on to the next decade, which I really reckon will be Richard's favourite?
It's actually my second favourite decade. It is. And I'm going to throw a curveball here. Whenever I actually made a list on the very night we suggested doing this, and I knew what my number one of the 80s would be. And then I played it, and I decided to play a few more again just to refamiliarize myself. And I've got a new favourite. And the curveball is I absolutely adore 1987's Islands. So I do. Now, this is very heavily synthesized, especially the long track, the wind chimes, parts 1 and 2. And funny enough, part 1 is almost like a finale, and then it stops, and you think, well, that was 2 minutes long. That should be actually at the end of the piece. But then it comes into the synthesizer, and there's a lot of it. But I love the music of it, and there's a lot of really good guitar work as well in this. And you also hear some of parts of the songs on side 2. So this is one of his one long side, the next one, the pop songs. And the reason I think this wins over other albums is I think the songs on side 2 are brilliant, bar one. So we have Islands with Bonnie Tyler. Now, either you like or you dislike Bonnie Tyler's voice, which I think you fall under the dislike, but you can't deny it's a brilliant song. Now, if you don't like Bonnie Tyler singing it and you have the CD, listen to When the Night's on Fire, because it's basically the same song rewritten with the gorgeous Anita Hegerland and her gorgeous voice. Flying Start with Kevin Ayers is a great little pop song, and I really enjoy that. And I believe Max Bacon actually sings it on the American version of Islands, could be wrong. North Point with Anita again is gorgeous. And then you have Magic Touch is the one I like the music of, but I don't like Max Bacon's voice. I have to say now, when it comes to pop songs by Mike Oldfield, I prefer the female voice over the male voice any day. So people like Anita Hegerland and Maggie Riley. And I always felt I wish Mike had written an album for Frida from ABBA. So you have to get ABBA into all these videos somehow. But I wish he had have, because I think it would work so well. But then the last song on the vinyl album is The Time Has Come, which is absolutely gorgeous, with Anita Hegerland singing as well. So yeah, I've played this about 4 times in a row this week. I loved every bit of it, and it's stamped definitely as my favourite of the 1980s. That's 1987's Islands, only got to number 29 in the charts.
Yeah, I don't like
Yeah.
full stuff. Sorry, Joe.
Is this all right?
Yeah, I don't.
No, yeah.
You go first.
I do like Bonnie Tyler myself personally, but I can get why other people wouldn't. I think I like Islands. It's a really good choice. The one I've chosen though is 5 Miles Out, which I think, I've just said Mike Oldfield, my favorite album he did was Incantations, but my favorite track he did was side 1 of 5 Miles Out, because I think Taurus 2 is just everything I love about Mike Oldfield in 25 minutes. The guitar work is astounding on that track. And I think, going back to what we were just saying, I think, I like the female vocals a lot more than the male vocals generally with Mike on his tracks. And I think Maggie Riley's just got such a wonderful voice. And, I love how the riff carries on as well from Taurus 2 into 5 Miles Out. He carries that over. And yeah, I mean, I actually prefer the Family Man, the version that Mike Oldfield did, to the Hall & Oates one that they obviously covered of his song, because again, I just like Maggie Riley's voice. And I love, with 5 Miles Out, I love how they build up that song. Even like Mike's vocals on it, how he uses the vocoder, and like when there's that bit where he's shouting on it about the eye of the hurricane and everything, it really makes it feel like a scary situation, because it's actually based on a real experience, a near-death experience that Mike Oldfield had when him and his touring band were traveling to do a show, and they got caught in this load of cloud, and luckily got out, of course. But the song kind of tells that story. I think this is a really strong album, and my favorite for the 80s.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's a really good. Taurus 2 is brilliant. Now, when I first played that, the bit where it slows down, I thought my record deck had packed up.
Yeah,
it really slows down, doesn't it? Blah, 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 blah. Hey. Then it starts up again, but that's typical Mike, just throwing a little curveball in the song. My 80s, I nearly went for 5 Miles Out, and there was another one in contention, so I kept playing the 2, and in the end, I went for 1980s QE2. Taurus 1 is just brilliant, and I like how bits from Taurus 1 end up in Taurus 2. There's that continuation of that little riff, that sort of things. Sheba, Maggie, this is Maggie Riley's first outing with Mike. Wonderful. The brilliant conflict with a bit of Bach Suite No. 2 in it is absolutely amazing. And then we get ABBA, Arrival. And I love both versions. Mike did a great version of that. Then he goes and does a Shadows track, Wonderful Land, which is wonderful. And the thing is, a few years later, the Shadows did the version of Moonlight Shadow. So there's a little bit of mutual respect there. QE2 is brilliant. I love how he incorporates the brass. It's my favourite track on the album. I love that track. Celt, it's one of the weaker, but I do like the drumming in it. It's just typical Mike Oldfield sort of drumming. And then we get Molly, which is all about his daughter, of course.
Mm-hmm.
So, it got to number 27, but it was the best-selling album in Germany in 1981.
There you
Brilliant.
go.
So there we go. There was that QE2, a forgotten album by Mr. Oldfield, I believe.
Definitely, yeah, definitely.
Well, QE2 was the one I had down originally. So it was, until it was taken over by Islands. And I must say, the track 5 Miles Out, Joe, is one of my all-time favourite Mike Oldfield tracks.
Yeah.
I think best ever singles. I don't like Family Man. I don't like his version. I don't like Hall & Oates' version. I just don't like the song. But 5 Miles Out is fantastic. Okay, so we go into the 90s now.
Yeah.
This is my favourite decade for Mike Oldfield. Not only is it my favourite decade, it has my favourite all-time Mike Oldfield album on it, and it has my favourite all-time album of the 1990s on it. And my favourite is Amarok from 1990. I think it is absolutely brilliant. I've never heard anything like it. It starts off so hectic, and then you get these guitar shrieks that nearly make you jump out of the chair. You're not expecting it. Sometimes you get some little low bits, and then bang, a guitar shriek hits you. And then some of the vocals, like Happy, I think is hilarious. Within the whole 60-minute one, it's a one piece of 60 minutes long, although the vinyl obviously is cut. And never buy the vinyl because they're 30 minutes each side, and it's crap. But within that 60 minutes, you get a lot of different types of music and a lot of catchy little pieces. You get a little bit of reggae in there, you get a little bit of Spanish flamenco in there. And I just think it's absolutely magnificent. Now, the one thing that I will say maybe puts it down is the Maggie Thatcher impression near the end. Whenever Janet Brown, I think it is, does her impression of her. I tried to think of that as just a posh woman, because it being Margaret Thatcher dates the album. But if you think of it just as a posh woman, it's grand. And the finale is wonderful. That sort of African choir at the end, it really does make the hair stand up on my arm. Absolutely fantastic album. And there's a little finale before it as well, with a little bit of Tubular Bells. So you get almost two finales on side two, one about 8 minutes before the end, and then the big one at the end. Magnificent piece of music, 60 minutes long, and that is my number one. Only got to number 49 in the charts. I think it was a middle finger up to Richard Branson because he knew that it wouldn't do well. But a lot of people think actually this is more like a follow-up to Omadon than Return to Omadon, because you do get little bits of Irishy fiddly music in there as well. So yeah, really good album, and that's my number one for the 90s.
Yeah,
I won't say too much about that, but I agree. Yeah, good choice.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's Mike Oldfield sticking two fingers up at Richard Branson. It was, I think, it's the end of the Virgin contract, and he was being pushed, and he said he just put something out, and he put out a bit genius. That's what I think about that.
I think it's genius. The next one isn't genius, mind, but
no. So, what about you, Joe? What's your 90s?
Okay. Well, I have gone with The Songs of Distant Earth, which is based on the Arthur C. Clarke novel. And I mean, Arthur C. Clarke was keen on Mike Oldfield doing it because he'd heard his soundtrack for The Killing Fields, and he was really impressed by that. And yeah, I think that there's some absolutely wonderful stuff on this album. You know, some of the guitar work on it kind of makes me think of David Gilmour, particularly like Let There Be Light. He's got the really sort of Gilmour-esque guitar playing in that song. You know, I love some of the use of the choirs throughout it, particularly on the track Hibernaculum and at the end of the album. You know, there's songs like Only Time Will Tell, which is really minimalistic, and yet it's just sounds so great. You know, Tubular World, another like the nth millionth take on the Tubular Bells theme, but it's a great version. It's like a spacey version of it. You know, it kind of creates that feeling of traveling to another world. And you know, it really is a great companion piece to the novel, and I'm quite a big science fiction fan, so yeah, I love that album.
I can't. You've said everything I'm going to say about it, because it's my favourite from the 90s as well. I love that sounds like the monks in a monastery. That is just so soothing. That's an album I like putting on a beach. Put the earphones on and just sit there, and you just get lost in this fantastic music of Mike. I love the book as well, and because I think if you've read the book, you can sort of go where Mike's going with this music, and you think of the book and the bits and I can see where you're going with this, Mike. It's an absolute gem. I nearly chose Tubular Bells too. Again, I really found this difficult, because I love both them albums, but in the end, I went with The Songs of the Distant Earth because it's just an amazing piece of music.
Yeah,
I agree. It's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. That's why the 90s is my favourite decade, because there's so many good albums in the 90s. However, the 2000s I struggled with. I could have cheated and gone for Tubular Bells 2003 because technically it's my favorite, but it's just re-recording of Tubular Bells. So for the 2000s, I've gone with Tres Lunas, or Tres Lunas, Three Moons. And to me, it's like a little brother of Songs of Distant Earth, but not as good. Although there are some really nice tracks. It's like a new age type album again. Misty, I think, is lovely. I really do. It's very simplistic. And what sounds like a saxophone, I don't even know if it is a sax or not, is playing through that, which is a nice touch. No Man's Land's pretty good. Turtle Island, the little acoustic song, is my favorite on the album. And I love the single To Be Free. I think it's great. I like the both versions. I think I actually prefer the LP version. It's not as in your face as little bit calmer than the single edit. And Thou Art in Heaven, which is like slow type club number. I think it's pretty good. Overall, it's not a bad album, but it's better for me than Light and Shade, which is too long for a start. And it's probably the weakest of all my choices, but it still wins the 2000s. And that's from 2002, Tres Lunas, and it didn't chart.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can't disagree because I'm going to choose the same thing. I also would go with Tres Lunas. I mean, I think, as you said, it's like the brother of the Songs of Distant Earth. It makes a great companion piece for it, along with maybe Light and Shade, because of course a couple of the tracks from Tres Lunas made it onto Light and Shade that kind of had that similar feel. But yeah, I mean, it was exactly what it was intended to be. He made it for a video game that he put together, and he wanted it to be something that wasn't like the usual video game where it's just about killing everything. He wanted it to be something that was just like a nice, relaxing, soothing experience. And I think the album is that. I love the title track. Again, I love To Be Free. I love that. I prefer, like yourself, the album version, and I love Jude Sims' vocals on it. There are some things I'm not too keen on. I wasn't a huge fan of Tubular Bells 3 and the kind of Ibiza style stuff in there, and there's a bit of that still sort of sagging over. And I wasn't too much of a fan of the saxophone on the keyboard, but I do like No Man's Land is a great track. Yeah, and it's just a really relaxing experience. And like you said, Light and Shade, despite what I said about Incantations, I find Light and Shade a bit too long. So yeah, Tres Lunas has got to be my choice.
Both good choices. I've got a thing called Tres Lunas 2.
Oh
yeah,
which is more music from the video game.
All right.
Something that I acquired from a colleague I used to work with, who was a huge Mike Oldfield fan. He said, "Have you heard this?" I went, "No." So there you go. Then he just give me this dodgy CD in a brown envelope sort of thing. That's really good as well. I may do a review of that one day because I haven't mentioned it. Okay, I'm the oddball in the 2000s because I've gone for that long one, Light and Shade, but I love it. As you said, it's got little bits left over from Tres Lunas. I love Blackbird. That's just wonderful. Closer, which sounds very much like Presta Toy. I don't know, just different arrangements of the same song, but I love that. Quicksilver's great as well, but my favourite thing is Lucky Fruity Loops. This shows that a great musician like Mike can take some Ibiza sounding thing and make it tuneful. And I love the guitar work in that real high pitch that you hadn't heard for a little while, that really bending the strings. Absolutely brilliant album. I'm the oddball. I don't think it's too long, but then again, I like long stuff. but they're a good choice of albums in the 2000s again. So the 2010s, there's not much to choose from here.
I think
it's one that one up.
I think we're going to have a trifecta here for the 2000s.
I do.
And for me, it's 2017's Return to Omadon, without a shadow of a doubt. I like this album. I think it's very atmospheric, but the one thing I really do like about it, it's more organic sounding than his almost electronic albums that were previous in the 2000s. There's some lovely acoustic guitar, some great electric guitar, beautiful melodies throughout, and I even like the way they've sort of jigged up the on horseback at the end. I think it's a nice touch. I do hear little bits of Amarok in this as well, just little tiny reminders of Amarok, and obviously reminders of the original Omadon. But for me, yeah, without a doubt, it's far better than Man on the Rocks, which I don't think the songs are that great on it. So Return to Omadon 2017, number 4 on the album charts.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think we're going to have a trifecta. I mean, yeah, I think, I do like bits of Man on the Rocks. I like Luke Spiller's vocals, even though I normally prefer the female vocals. And I think I quite like the Struts as well, his band. But there's no competition here. Return to Omadon is it's back to the style of those first 3 albums. And I think unlike Tubular Bells 2, although I love Tubular Bells 2, I think some ways it's arguably too similar to the original, whereas this is kind of, it's got references to Omadon, but it's also its own thing. Great album cover, not really relevant to the music, but great album cover. I've got the poster from the vinyl up there. It's it kind of reminds me of Hergest Ridge as well at points, as well as Omadon, some of the bits in it. And I love, kind of how, in the same way as Omadon Part 1 ends with that fantastic guitar solo, you've got some really great guitar at the end of Part 1 as well. And I hope there's more to come from Mike. I mean, I don't know whether he's going to release any more new material. There was talks about Tubular Bells 4 a few years ago. But I mean, if this was the one that he was going to bow out on, I think it's a great one to end a career on, certainly.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm same as you, Return to Omadon. I think it's a combination of all the first 3 albums. He's taken little elements from all of them. What I like about that as well is towards the end how he fades in the original Omadon. Just towards the end, just paying a little bit of homage to Omadon. I can't add any more what you two have said. It is not much choice. There are some really some highlights on Man on the Rocks, as Joe said, but when it come down to it, it was only one. So we all agree on the 2017s. Well, as you can see, people have swapped places. It's because we only have the half an hour on Zoom because I'm not paying £119 a year. So as you can see, Joe's at the bottom now. So this time round we'll go Richard and Joe the other way round for the wild cards. I mean, it's obviously this has been edited, isn't it, chaps?
Yeah.
Fair. So I thought we'd do a wild card, guys, because we all love Tubular Bells and everything else, and we couldn't put everything in. So that's why we've got a wild card. So it can be anything that Mike Oldfield's done.
Okay.
So do you want to start, Richard, with your wild card?
Well, indeed. Now, as I said earlier, I prefer Tubular Bells 2 to Tubular Bells. And Tubular Bells 2 is my second favourite Mike Oldfield album. But because I picked Tubular Bells, I do not want to pick TB2. So I'm going to pick my third favourite album. It's also from the 90s, and it's the Millennium Bell from 1999. Whenever I first heard this, I hated it. I thought it was rubbish. And then in the early 2000s, I bought this live CD stroke DVD combo, and it had quite a few of the Millennium Bell songs on, and I played the DVD of it. I thought, these are great, these are fantastic. And I went back to the actual Millennium Bell album, and I fell completely in love with it. I absolutely think it's magnificent. I love the opener, Peace on Earth, with the na-na-nas. I think it's wonderful. The song Santa Maria, the vocal on that is absolutely to die for. It's absolutely beautiful. Sunlight Shining Through Cloud is another great one. I don't know if I'm pronouncing this properly, but it's the Dougie's Palace or the Doug's Palace or whatever. It's a great little racy little number. I believe this album is looking at music through time, from way back in the ancient days right up to the millennium. and it's really, really brilliant. Now there's but it's the song Mastermind has got a bit of a almost James Bondy type sound to it. And then there's Broad Sunlight Uplands. That kind of reminds me, believe it or not, the end sequence of The Incredible Hulk with Bill Bixby. Either that or something from Love Story. I just can't get that out of my head. And the Millennium Bell is absolutely fantastic as well. It's a brilliant closer. I think this is great, and this is where the vocalists really do enhance the album. It's not just music. I just love the album from start to finish. Brilliant. So my wild card is the Millennium Bell from 1999, and it got to the heights of 133 in the charts.
Well, people didn't know what good music was in them days, did they? Yeah, I quite like that album, and I like the Doogie bit as well. I think that's terrific. It's a proper Mike Oldfield jiggy type thing, isn't it? Absolutely great album. Good choice.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I actually I'm in the camp where I've only heard it the once and I wasn't too keen on it, so I'll have to revisit it based on what you said, Richard. It'd be interesting. My wild card, I thought about being a real shit stirrer and going for Heaven's Open because I like the title track and I like Music from the Balcony and I like how little of a fuck he gave at that point because it was his last thing with Richard Branson, but I didn't go for that. I went for Amarok, of course. And again, I wanted to pick it for the 90s, but I had to go with Songs of Distant Earth. It's interesting, this album. It tends to be very divisive. Some people claim it's his best work and other people just don't get it. And I think it's probably the strangest album in his catalogue, but I think it's brilliant. It takes multiple listens, I think, to really get into it and appreciate all that's going on because the list of instruments he plays on this album is as long as it is bizarre. You've got stuff like Toy Dog and spoons and stuff like that on there. It didn't sell well at the time because Branson wanted it to be Tubular Bells 2, and Mike said, well, it isn't that, and he refused to have it called Tubular Bells 2. And he said, if anything, it was Omadorn 2. Which of course now we've got, but I like, actually there is the similarities as well, not only in some of the sound as Richard pointed out, but also in the fact that the cover image was done by the same guy, and it's got kind of the little raindrops that Omadorn's got on the cover. So yeah, I think it's brilliant. I love the little Morse code in there, by the way, to Richard Branson, the little F off message to Branson. Yeah, brilliant album.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, it was a bit of a, as I said earlier, it was just two fingers up at Richard Branson, who I've had the pleasure of meeting. Yeah, we'll leave it at that. I don't want to get into trouble. But yeah, it's a bit, yeah. Anyway, my wild card, I had it nailed down to 3 albums. Guitars, which I love. Very simplicity, just guitars, wonderful. Tres Lunas was in there. And in the end, I went with one that's a bit of a curveball, but it just proves what a great composer this guy is. It is 2008's Music of the Spheres. I just think this is amazing. It just proves this guy doesn't just do pop. He can write classical pieces. I love how he got Hayley Wester involved with this because she's an incredible singer. And what she, On My Heart, is wonderful. It's the best thing on that album. But the whole album from start to finish, it's Mike Oldfield, but done with an orchestra. I mean, I love the orchestral versions of Tubular Bells and Urgis Ridge. They're incredible. Again, it just proves what good compositions they are. But I had to go with this. It's just brilliant all the way through. And I love at the end, he brings in the Tubular Bells are on there towards the end of the album. The striking of them bells, it sort of tidies it all up. It makes it, okay, I've done this classical bit, but there's my Tubular Bells just to finish this album off.
I think the start of that album is very similar to the start of Tubular Bells, but just I think it's too similar in a way for me. I think, oh my God, he's just rehashing the start of Tubular Bells again. But overall, I do enjoy the album, but it didn't get in my 2000s, unfortunately.
Yeah, I like it. I do actually. I know there is obviously an orchestral version of Tubular Bells, but I kind of prefer music of the spheres. So I kind of think of that in a way as the orchestral version of Tubular Bells because it has got the similarities. But yeah, I mean, it's amazing that you can do that classical stuff too. Yeah, great choice.
Yeah, I mean, I've got the live version as well, and that's even better. I don't know how you can say that the live version is better than the studio, but in this case, I think the live version is better. And this album happens to be Mastermind Dave's favourite album as well. So
All right.
he sort of, when he said, "Whoa," I said, "Well, it'll be in there." I mean, so so there you go, Dave. I did get the mention. Right.
Can I mention a few of the singles, by the way, since
Yeah, why not? We've got plenty of time.
Yeah,
because I think Mike Oldfield's singles are incredible. Like in the 1970s, his first single was the Mike Oldfield single, which is a part of Tubular Bells' second side. However, I absolutely love the B-side of it, which is Froggy Went to Courting. I think it's absolutely hilarious.
Yeah.
I also love Don Alfonso. I think the guitar work in that is really, really good, but the song itself is hilarious. And in fact, the B-side of that was in Dulce Jubilo for Maureen, which was the original version of Un Dulce Jubilo before he re-recorded it again with On Horseback as its B-side or double A side. And then Portsmouth, another little catchy number, Cuckoo Song, great. And I love his version of the William Tell Overture. I think it's fantastic. Blue Peter. So the 70 singles are great. You know, they're all like Tin Whistly type songs, a lot of them. But some fantastic pop songs in the 80s, like You Can't Deny, Moonlight Shadow is brilliant. 5 Miles Out is brilliant. To France is another really good song, and The Time Has Come, which was from Islands, is unbelievable. Even Pictures in the Dark with, what do you call that wee fella? He's not a wee fella anymore, he's
Alex
15.
Jones.
Alex Jones, that's your boy. I think that's great as well. And that's got Neil Hegerland on it as well. So I think, you know, I would love to see a full compilation of just Mike Oldfield's songs.
Yeah,
vocal songs.
I think it's right. I mean, I've done my singles, and one of the guys said that there's some more out there, which I didn't know. So that's coming up. I want to give a bit of a shout to the soundtrack to The Killing Fields.
Yeah, it's not a bad soundtrack. It's not my favourite. And
Yes.
I do like Etude as well. I think it's a great wee number.
Yeah, I mean, we all went to see the film because Mike
Mhm.
Oldfield did the soundtrack, believe it or not. And it turned out to be an absolutely belting film anyway. I mean, I sort of know the story, but, you know, again, this is how good this man is. He can turn his hand to anything.
Mhm.
And
yeah,
in the evacuation, listen to it as a piece of music. It's weird, but when you're watching the film, he grabs all the tension and the hysteria in that, and some of the bits for Pran, blood sucking and all that. You know, I don't know if he did it the old-fashioned way, looked at the film and then composed, but Etude is just wonderful. It's the only film that made me have a tear down my eye. He plays John Lennon Imagine at the end.
All right, okay.
Oh, everyone in the gulped, and then it went into Etude, and that's just wonderful. I love the cover of Etude, the single.
Unfortunately, it was used for a Nurofen ad as well in the late 80s. I don't know for that, Iain, but I actually ranked the Mike Oldfield singles a couple of years ago, and my number one choice was actually a remix of The Bell, which I think is it's unbelievable. There's a little sort of grainy video on YouTube for The Bell. I could watch it over and over and over again. It's fantastic, and I think it's Vivian Stanshall doing the introducing the instruments. But Mike Oldfield singles, I think, are magnificent.
Anyway, I'd sent you a picture, didn't I? Which is going to be in part of the intro.
I replied.
Yes. Did you? I know Richard got them all right, but did you, Joe? Did you see all the?
Yeah, I think I got them all right. I'm trying to remember what's on there now. So there's Tubular Bells 1, 2, and 3.
Yes.
Platinum's on there. Crises, Hergest Ridge. I'm trying to remember the other one now. There's another one. Can't remember what the other one is. 5 miles out. Yeah, that's the one.
Yes, you see, they are. You know, I thought I'd test them, see how they know their thing. That wolfhound is not actually off the picture, off the album.
It's facing the wrong way.
It's facing the wrong way for a start. Yeah. But the one off the album cover, I even scanned it in and I couldn't get a proper outline, so I just did an ivory wolfhound. But the one that got me, Dave had a look at it, was the little butterfly from Platinum.
Yeah.
Doggy's head. Anyway, thank you very much, guys. I've really enjoyed this. I think a lot of people are looking forward to this one as well, because I think my channel's got loads of Mike Oldfield fans, and I'm sure there's a few on yours. So thank you much for taking time out on a Saturday, Joe. I know you're a busy chap.
No, it's been great. Fantastic.
And once again, Richard, I'll be emailing you in the week because he's come up with a really good idea for one, and I've done the list.
I haven't even touched it yet, so
I'm one up on you this time. So that's all for today, folks. But tomorrow I'm back because it's someone's birthday tomorrow, isn't it? I wonder whose it is. Richard's getting a lot of plug on my channel this weekend. He's on today and he's getting mentioned tomorrow. How rude's that? But yeah, great. So that'll be up sometime tomorrow, Richard, when I get up. So once again, thank you guys, and it's goodbye for me.
That's goodbye from both of them.
Okay, folks, thanks ever so much for watching. I will see you all soon.